What's up, everybody? It's Flashwing back again for another podcast, this time podcast number 3. And today we're going to be talking about one of the subjects that actually encompasses my favorite holiday. Today, as you saw by the title of this video, we're talking about gratitude. I know, it's such an exciting topic, isn't it? I know you guys are just chomping at the bit to click on this video and listen to talk about gratitude and everything to be thankful for. We're rapidly approaching the month of October, and we're not too far away from Thanksgiving, which is my all-time favorite holiday. It has been for a number of years. It greatly surpassed Christmas quite a while ago, and although it's really premature to be talking about Thanksgiving, I have had the thoughts of gratitude, about the subject of gratitude, and have really been on the brain for the past couple of weeks. First, I want to say thank you very much to everybody who listened to the second podcast video, or the second podcast audio, rather, because there ain't no video on these. Thank you very much for the kind words and the feedback. I really, really appreciate to those of you who stick it out with these different podcast videos. I keep wanting to say something else, but that's just all that comes out as a video. You guys are greatly appreciated, and I really do enjoy doing these. I'm doing my best to get better. I don't necessarily plan for podcasts to completely take over the entire channel, but I do like to mix it up a little bit so that I can still produce content for you guys that's both interesting to you and interesting to me, and something that I can actually get done within my own time constraints here at the channel. All right, so now that I've gotten all of my recent brain farts out of the way, this has been on my mind over the past couple of weeks, after the passing of a good friend, and kind of realizing that I've done a really terrible job of letting people in my life know how important they are, in the sense of having the gratitude of both the positive things and the negative things that have happened to me in my own life. And in the process of going through all of that, really being able to easily see that everything in my life is connected in one way or another. Both the positive events and the negative events in my life, they're all connected, and how important it is to be able to be grateful for, of course, the positive things, which is, as far as I'm concerned, anybody can do this. You know, being grateful for the positive people and the positive circumstances and all the great things that make us happy within our own lives. I feel like it's very easy and within short reach to be able to be grateful for those things. Where the real stretch comes into play for a lot of people, and indeed I think the real substance of gratitude, the stuff that actually really makes an emotional and psychological difference, is being grateful for the things that are not so great. You know, being grateful for even the negative events that have happened in life. And this is not only the most rewarding, but of course it is also the most difficult part of gratitude, because it really requires a significant shift in how we think about our lives and how we not only look at the events in our lives, but even some of the habits with respect to those events, such as being able to reevaluate the things that have happened to us in life. And all of this is tied up in the aspects of expressing and feeling and thinking about things that we're grateful for. But I guess I have to start this off with, number one, most importantly, why does this matter? You know, I mean, whenever you guys come and listen to these videos, I feel like this is probably one of the most important questions, is the why. Because once you have a good establishment understanding of why I feel this is important, it can potentially give you guys the energy and the time and patience to stick it out through these podcasts to learn more, or at the very least to simply gain a different perspective. Why does gratitude matter? I really believe that it's one of the open secrets to happiness. I'm not going to say that gratitude is the only way to happiness, but I feel like it would definitely constitute as being one of the major pillars, or, you know, one of the major legs on a three-legged stool. There are other elements that come into play when it comes to expressing, feeling, and ultimately discovering happiness within your own life. And I do not believe that you can do that without having gratitude as being one of the major muscles that you flex in your quest to establishing a happy life. It should be noted that, and there's a ton of different information out there that will back up my viewpoint on this, but happiness really is a state of mind. It's not something that you find. It's something that you become. It's something that you decide on. It's not a destination. It's the journey. There's a pretty common misconception that happiness is something that you find or discover or arrive at. But very often what people end up finding out who really are introspective and truly trying to make an effort to discover happiness is that it's been there all along. It's been inside of us the entire time, that any time that we wanted, we were able to flip that switch and to discover happiness on our own. And that's a tough thing to do. I mean, because you're having to, especially as you get older and you're kind of set in your ways and you're kind of set in your thinking. And a lot of this really requires being very open, and with openness also either comes or requires humility as well. So I mean, there's really a lot of order of operations to this stuff, and so one of the problems with gratitude most specifically is that it's not easy for everybody. There's a number of people in different circumstances that are going to find gratitude very difficult, and a lot of that has roots in the fact that psychologically we're sort of wired to be very, very sensitive to negative emotions and negative memories, and that if you think about compliments, there's one thing that's said about compliments is that it takes 8 positive compliments. I believe it's something around 7 or 8 positive compliments to undo 1 negative insult. And so negativity is something that we're really, really sensitive to. And so it takes a lot of effort to exercise gratitude in a way that will sort of undo a lot of the negative aspects and emotions and memories that we have. So that being said, what is so important about gratitude is because I believe it's one of the major paths to happiness. And so while you have to incorporate other factors, I really don't think that you're going to be able to discover and find happiness in your own life and in the things that you're doing without being able to express gratitude for all of the things in your life, both the positive and the negative. And the reason why this has been on my mind is because of, as I mentioned before, I've been really bad about letting people know, friends, family, acquaintances, what have you, about the important role that sometimes these people play in my life, and it's not even necessarily so much a case of giving thanks or appreciation, but just letting people know that that they have significance. And it kind of goes into my last podcast where I talk about the case of, we having to choose between being truly significant and or having the appearance of significance, and most importantly, being able to live without the potential of knowing for sure that you've had significance. That sometimes we have to have a little bit of faith that significance exists. But I feel like it helps when people are able to express that significance to somebody else, letting them know, like, hey, you've made a tremendous difference in my life. And I would even go so far as to say that, something that I've been working on this week is, letting people know that they've had a significant impact on my life, even when that individual is tied up in circumstances that weren't always great. Because the fact of the matter is that our negative experiences are just as connected to us as our positive ones are. And even though, especially within the moment, those negative circumstances, trying to find some kind of positive meaning in a lot of that stuff can be nearly impossible. But the key with a lot of this is to exercise gratitude in a way that sort of forces us to reevaluate aspects of our past, and that's something I'll talk about a little bit later. But needless to say that I think it's a natural human tendency to make a judgment, even a snap judgment about circumstances, things that happen to us, events, and then to hold on to that judgment through the rest of our lives without ever revisiting it from the context of, having some history separating that event and today. So, if you were to stub your toe, in the midst of it, it's painful. It hurts. I have really sensitive feet. And if I was ever captured and tortured and somebody came at me with a ball peen hammer, man, I'll tell you whatever you want to know. But I have really sensitive feet. And man, stubbing my toes, it sucks. It's really painful. And at the time, naturally speaking, it's not a pleasant experience. But if, say 10 years from now, I was to realize that I stubbed my toe really bad and that, delayed me from leaving the house for 15 minutes because I had to sat there and, do my best Peter Griffin impersonation, for 15 minutes. And then I was to leave the house and in the process of going through a traffic intersection, narrowly miss somebody turning left and cramming right into me and killing me. Looking back at that scenario, I could say, gosh, stubbing my toe really sucked, but had I left the house a little bit earlier, I might be dead right now. And those are the kinds of connections that are really important, because if I just, if all I did was, get to my destination and tell, maybe the potential person I was meeting how awful my morning was because I stubbed my fucking toe and I sat there for 15 minutes like a baby wincing and whining, I would miss the fact that I may have actually avoided a significant car crash and being killed and not even making it to my destination to even talk about that story. And so it really, really requires, in many cases, in order to do this properly in a way that's meaningful, you got to really sort of step outside your life or step outside yourself and kind of view things from the outside, without either taking your ego into consideration or most certainly those tendencies to make those snap judgments, and really focus on, was this really a bad thing? Or was it just simply something bad at the time that culminated into a potential positive later on? So that's something I'll probably revisit, but most certainly something to keep in mind as we talk about all this. So I guess we can start with the basics, because, especially if you live in the United States, this is most definitely true. Again, that's the nature of my context with a lot of these videos. But one thing about gratitude, like one of the prerequisites, is you have to be able to imagine, or at the very least have the awareness of really, really awful shit out there. Okay. Because everything with respect to gratitude is really about context, and it's about perspective. And so if your context and perspective is a very narrow bubble, and you're, think about, I was having a conversation with someone I know about their 14-year-old daughter and some of the difficulties that her daughter was going through, especially socially in school. Sounds like her daughter's highly intelligent, very creative and gifted. And, she's naturally having some difficulty dealing with social situations. And in this case, it's the end of the world. You got kids, especially teenagers, what as adults seems like the stupidest of things, especially in the context of knowing that, things that happen in grade school very rarely extend beyond grade school itself into the real world. We have a tendency to kind of belittle those situations and forget that, to these kids, that pain is real. It's that pain and that anxiety is the size of Godzilla. And for us, the pain and anxiety of the size of Godzilla is like, our house burning down or someone dying or getting, diagnosed with cancer or things like that. And so it can be very easy to forget that, to kids, that stuff's a huge deal. And so it's a matter of perspective. So you got to imagine if you're 14 years old, and you're living with your parents, and you don't have a job because it's technically not legal to work if you're 14. Your perspective is going to be pretty narrow, and of course, the slightest upset in your life is going to be a huge deal. Pet dies. I mean, it's the end of the world, the absolute end of the world, the worst possible thing. Is here today, gone tomorrow. And so, but I mean, that situation doesn't just stop when you're a kid. It expands into you're being an adult too. And so it is very, very important to have the ability to be open, or not open, but you have to have the ability to use your imagination, or at the very least be able to look at the experiences of other people across the planet and realize that you need to realize and be able to imagine how bad your circumstances could really be. Okay. And again, sort of the deeper that you get down the rabbit hole of negative events, most certainly the more difficult that this process can become, because at some point, you're invariably going to be asking, well, how much worse can it get? Well, I don't know. It's already pretty bad, so it couldn't possibly bottom out much worse than it already has. But I got to tell you, there's some real power in circumstances like that. And I guess I'll take a little sidebar here to talk about one of the things that I plan on doing a podcast on sometime in the near future, is discussing how we have our definitions of strength and weakness really backwards. And I'll just give you a little bit of a preview. We have a tendency to believe that certain things or certain signs or demonstrations are demonstrations of strength. Police and law enforcement, or powerful figures. In fact, there was a story that I came across on Facebook just yesterday discussing a woman from Romania that was captured and taken to Auschwitz, which was one of the Nazi German concentration camps, and how she was experimented on, and how she later in life, after the camp was liberated by the Russians, and she was released and saved in the process. But very simply about how she was able to go back and to actually forgive the people who had committed some of these atrocities. And in the process of doing all of this, they discussed the aspect of forgiveness itself, and how she was the only person that she discovered that she had this power inside of her, this power to forgive. And how no matter how powerful these men were, and no matter how many lives they had taken, and that from the outside they would seem to be the ones with all the power, but here you have the most powerless person who is the only person that is capable of forgiving a Nazi. Because as a Nazi, you can't forgive yourself per se. I mean, you can. I mean, you can have some of that self-forgiveness, but it'll never be forgiveness on the level, scale, or power of a person whose life you actually impacted. And so we have this tendency to have this notion of strength and weakness really backwards. And even if you're in the position of bottoming out, if things are really terrible, you have the tremendous amount of power to impact the lives of other people. And I'll take a minute I wanted to talk about my father real quick, because I was having a discussion with my mom about recently, discussing how, because my dad was fortunate enough to touch a lot of the lives of people around him, and in a very, very positive way. A lot of his friends and family, and of course, me, I'm here as a result of him as well. But his both alive and in death, he's continued to impact the lives of other people, and he did that, I think, primarily because, it was obviously because of who he was. But he had tremendous health issues. If you're not familiar with some of my older videos, very simply, he was born with type A diabetes, diagnosed at 7 years old, and in a time period where medical technology with diabetes was really crude. Because I believe my dad was born in 1948, and so as he got older, one of the first major problems was he lost his eyesight, and then later he had kidney failure. Followed up by circulatory problems and a major infection in one of his legs, and he had one of his legs amputated. So by the time my father passed when I was 13 years old, he's missing a leg, he's on dialysis because he's got no kidneys, and the man's blind, and he's also diabetic. But he had this contagious personality and a fantastic sense of humor, and he was wicked smart. But I really think that despite all of his personality traits and his intelligence and his drive and tenacity in life, I don't think that he would have reached as many people or touched as many lives had he been healthy. And I only say that because it was his perceived weakened state that actually gave him the most power. Because from the rest of the world, looking at this man who's missing a leg and blind and on dialysis, anybody no one would have blamed my father for being bitter and for being upset at his circumstances and feeling cheated and feeling like, life dealt him a bad hand, and and saying, oh, fuck everybody else because everybody else has got it so easy. They've got their healthy bodies. I mean, there was no one would have blamed him for being sour and being bitter about his life circumstances, but he didn't. He decided instead that he was going to find ways to still be involved in life and still be productive and still achieve goals and take care of his family and to keep his sense of humor and his joy and love for life. Doesn't mean that it was always easy. Doesn't mean that he didn't suffer bouts of depression. It doesn't mean that he didn't have moments where he, legitimately sat there and questioned and wanted to know, gosh, why me? But I really think that we have a lot of our strengths and weaknesses backward. So anyway, that's a little bit of a sidebar into something that I definitely want to talk about later. But I do want to focus exclusively on gratitude. And I guess so having perspective and being able to imagine the worst in your life is most certainly kind of the base requirement, because if you can't use your imagination and understand truly how much worse things could be in your life, then a lot of this is kind of a non-starter, because you need to be able to understand that if you're a healthy person, that you could exist in an unhealthy state. That if you're a young person, that eventually you're going to get older. If you're fortunate enough to be wealthy, that you could be incredibly unwealthy. And if you're not wealthy, you could have absolutely nothing and be destitute and living on the street. And if you're on the street, I mean, you could be dead. I mean, so there's always, with potentially death being at the very bottom of the floor, although I think some of us could argue there's probably circumstances worse than death in many cases. That being said, it's always important. You have to have that perspective, and you have to have that awareness and the ability to use your imagination and understand that your circumstances could always be worse, and your life could always be worse. So I think that's probably one of the major prerequisites. And the next prerequisite, most importantly, is humility. And this is something I'm really, really big on. I think modesty has its place in many cases, but certainly humility and recognizing the fragile nature of your life and your very narrow perspective, and just really how small we all are. Probably one of the most awe-inspiring aspects of just simply looking up into the night sky is consistently being reminded about how big the universe is and just how inconsequential our existence on Earth really is, and how this planet could explode and, except for all of us, the rest of the universe would go on unimpeded and most likely wouldn't even know about it. And there's things that we're observing even now that, happened, millions and millions of years ago that have long since, been done and over with. And, we're just sitting here worrying about the fact that, being upset because, the Starbucks barista guy didn't spell my name right on my coffee cup or something. And so it's, again, I think the aspect of humility is super important when it comes to gratitude, and that also being a prerequisite. So we've kind of discussed what the importance of gratitude is, because it's one of the major pillars of happiness. We've discussed some of the prerequisites: having perspective, being able to use your imagination, and certainly exercising some humility. And so, if you're looking for, then of course there's always the potential of, well, I don't have anything to be grateful for. Oh boy, that's when I do hear a lot whenever it seems like the subject of gratitude comes up. I don't have anything to be grateful for. My life sucks and this and that. You could start with the bare basics, like the super bare basics. Number one, be grateful for being alive. The realization that people are dying every minute of every day. I mean, maybe not in the immediate vicinity, but somewhere on this planet, 24 hours a day, people are losing their lives. Some of them tragically, and some of them painfully and torturous. So, staying alive is hard work. Just the difficulty of just not being killed, in circumstances throughout your daily life. And then you're dealing with health issues and a number of other different conditions that can take the lives of people. So number one, and most importantly, be grateful for being alive. Be grateful for the fact that you woke up today. You got all your faculties. You got out of bed with both legs, hopefully. The fact that the fact that you had a bed to sleep in to begin with, and a roof over your head, and that you're able to listen to this podcast on whatever smartphone device or PC that you're listening to. I mean, these are all incredible things to be grateful for. So just simply being alive, and the simple things like, we never think about, like climate control, especially living here in Phoenix, would be pretty much impossible to survive here with any relative comfort without air conditioning during the summertime. Because I don't have to tell you guys, it gets hot as balls outside. And so just simply being grateful for, having access to heat and having access to climate control and the ability to drive a car, that your bum ass doesn't have to walk, those 20 miles to the office every day, that you don't have to like live at your job and then make the journey home every weekend to see your family. Transportation. But I mean, like, just like those of us who live in the United States, this is something that's come up too because of, just like all the politics and recent events and stuff like that, and this real sense of anti-Americanism, not like anti-American government or anti like political party, but just like this country sucks. I don't think that people really have enough gratitude for the incredible the lottery that you won just by being born here. I think I worked it out. Like, there's like 7 billion people and there's 300 million of them here. I mean, you had a very, very low percentage chance. I think it was like 3% or something like that. I can't remember what the math shook out to be, but a chance of actually being born in the United States. I'm sure it's even less than that. I'm just being very elementary about it. And my God, I mean, you win a tremendous lottery just by being born here. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I don't exactly see a mass exodus to hit the door on, and get out of this place. From what I see, people are making a huge concerted effort to break in as much as they can. So, I mean, we have something really special here. And just simply being born in America, if you happen to be an American listening to this, like, that's something to be grateful for. And then you just have all the modern conveniences, or not even modern really, just conveniences in general that we don't really even think about, like access to running water, clean running water. None of you guys have to worry about, contracting any kind of an illness or disease by drinking the water that comes out of your tap, because of the all of the industry that is responsible for providing clean drinking water on from multiple taps inside your home. And you have to think about the people out there that don't have access to running water. In fact, I was talking with a coworker of mine just this past week who he was making the claim that he's got to be the poorest person that he's ever met in terms of upbringing, and discussing he grew up in the South. And he's like, we didn't even have running water in my house when I was a kid. He's like, we had to go down the road a few miles to a well with a pump. And he's like, and I had to fill containers full of water so that we could bring back home. So we didn't have running water in our house. And it's like, damn. I mean, something as simple as being able to take a shower every day for some people, even in the United States at points in the past, if not still currently, is a luxury. So, I mean, I think it's really, really, if this is not a muscle that you're used to exercising, and especially if you're one of these people that think that you don't have anything to be grateful for, I hope you can appreciate the fact, based on what I just laid out, that there's a lot that you can be grateful for. But the other aspects, like the modern technology, I mean, you got to understand, things from a technological perspective are like easily in science fiction territory when you start comparing, our way of life to, 20 years ago, even 30 years ago, certainly, but even maybe 20 years ago. The fact that you can have a smartphone that is connected to the internet, and the internet being pretty much the sole accumulation of all human knowledge and experience is unbelievable. I mean, probably the only next major step is being able to cognitively tap into that to the point where you have instant access via your own brain to that level of data and that level of expertise and skill. But just simply at this point in time, that you could be doing just about any activity. And especially if you think about like friends of mine now, because we're all getting older now, and we're all buying our own houses, and of course, none of us can afford to necessarily purchase a pristine, awesome, well-built house right off the bat. And so some of my friends have been buying some fixer-uppers, and it's like, okay, I've never done this particular task. Okay, well, I mean, you can YouTube it, and somebody somewhere on YouTube has done a how-to video on how to do just about everything that you could possibly imagine. And if you can use your eyes and potentially even learn by watching, you could shortcut yourself a tremendous amount of time in picking up a basic skill, like plumbing, wiring, laying tile floor, anything like that. And just being thankful for the internet, this amazing communication tool that is bringing the sound of my voice to you wherever you are across the planet, is an amazing feat. And I mean, growing up when the very, very beginnings of the internet were around, where I was using my 2400 baud modem that on my parents' computer and dialing into the local bulletin board service that somebody was running off of their computer server. It can be a little difficult sometimes to sort of stop and turn around and look backwards and realize that we have come an awfully far way. And think about the problems that we have now. I mean, people who get bummed out over social media, and people who get pissed off because there's drama here or there, or people talking shit about other people online. And it's like, does anybody ever stop and realize that you got two people that are talking shit to each other in a 1080p or a 4K format, in a video format and capability that was absolutely unheard of 10 or 15 years ago, when we're all sitting around waiting for our single JPEG or GIF file to download, and or we're downloading a demo for a video game or something that's taking 7 to 10 hours, and having to deal with the fact that our stupid parents keep picking up the phone and fucking up our download. I mean, and even then, that capability in and of itself was revolutionary at the time. So it's like, you got two guys on YouTube, whoever they may be, just hypothetical, talking shit to each other in a video format that like 10, 15 years ago was way better than even the best possible quality. I mean, and all we're focused on is the drama, So being able to establish a really simple baseline might actually go a long way to helping you realize that if you happen to be a person who thinks you don't have anything to be grateful for, I promise you can find something, and it's important to focus on that. It's a muscle that you have to learn to exercise, and like any muscle building exercise, you're not going to be able to lift a tremendous amount of weight right off the bat. You may have to very well start with something very basic when it comes to gratitude, such as, I'm just happy to be alive today. So, I'm trying to think here. I apologize. This is not a professional operation over here. I'm trying to go through my notes here as I'm finishing points. One of the other difficulties when it comes to gratitude is, with the respect, this is kind of in line with what I discussed earlier with respect to our sensitivity to negative emotions and negative circumstances. One of the other difficulties that people have with gratitude in general is we have a tendency to focus on the things that we don't have. There's always sort of this clawing and running towards the next best thing, and it's sort of this natural human tendency towards focusing on inadequacy, and so it's always thinking about, trying to earn more money, trying to have more friends, trying to be better looking, trying to postpone aging, trying to have more subscribers, trying to do more videos. It's always more. And a lot of this aspects of inadequacy and the quest for more is just simply predominated mostly in this, this quest for happiness. We kind of have this, this mansion on a hill kind of thing with whatever it is that we want, our dreams, our aspirations, our goals and desires. And, we always focus on what we don't have. We always focus on the next objective or the next goal. I wouldn't be too surprised if this has got some type of an evolutionary or biological connection. But at the bottom line is that, that it's a case of, stopping and smelling the roses, as the cliche saying goes. But it's definitely important to look around at the things that you have and appreciate the things that you have. Appreciate your current state of health, no matter what it is. I mean, I know that I have friends of mine who, have been diagnosed with cancer. I've had family members who have died from health complications. So certainly being in a poor or poorer state of health can really negatively impact you. But realizing that it could be a lot worse. I mean, no matter what it is that you're facing, no matter what your ailment is, the situation could always be worse. And at the end of the day, even if you feel like you don't really have any farther to go, you could be dead today. So again, like there's always something that we can find to be grateful for, regardless of how bad your situation is. But we do focus a lot on the things that we don't have. We focus on the fact that we don't have, like I said, we don't have a lot of money, or we don't have a lot of fame, or we don't have a lot of friends, or we don't have a lot of respect from the people that we know. And gratitude most definitely helps you refocus on the immediate, on the present, because you can't be necessarily grateful for things that you don't have. You can be certainly grateful for opportunities that you are currently experiencing or enjoying that could lead to having more things. Such as that I'm grateful for, if you have a promotion during your career, or if you're an entrepreneur and you're really expanding your business, those sorts of things you can be certainly grateful for, especially in the context of what they could provide down the line in the future. But more often than not, the stuff that you're going to be grateful for is either going to be in the present or it's going to be in the past. And so the feelings of inadequacy and the constant quest for more, that sort of thing can really be combated with gratitude. That's another major benefit, is that it really teaches you to look at what you have and to look at how far you've come in your life. And it really can help dampen the constant strive and rat race for more stuff, more people, more fame, more power. Not that it's going to totally eliminate it, because I feel like having goals and striving for achievements of things in your life is important. But the fact of the matter is that helping to dull that natural human tendency to only focus on the inadequacies in our lives can be combated a lot with gratitude. So something else I want to talk about, and I have kind of a personal connection to this. I'm not going to give you too many details because it is kind of personal. But recently, I've reevaluated some things that have happened to me in the past. And this past week, I experienced a sense of gratitude about some past events that I honestly never, ever thought that I could ever potentially have a positive feeling for. And it really helped emphasize how important it is to, again, revisit these negative things that happen to us, because we're always so tied up in, how bad they made us feel, and potentially any other fallout that came as a result of it. But I don't think it's a very common thing to think about past events and put them into context with the present. And this past week especially, it has really helped me reevaluate some negative things that happened to me, and to understand that, whether it's the universe or it was God, somebody did me an incredible favor by saving me from myself. And I really was thinking hard about some past events and things that happened to me that certainly at the time felt like it was the end of the world. And even just, you could say even last week, that I would say, well, I have to admit that without those events taking place, I would have most likely been in a very different place in my life, but I could potentially imagine myself in a positive place. It would have just been different. But I feel very differently today that had the events in question played out differently, I think my life would have been miserable, to be honest. I think I would have been a hollowed out shell, and I would have just been discarded and left on the side of the road, and my life would have been very, very different. And I would have most likely not met the people that I've met and done the things that I've done and learned the things I've learned, all of which I am incredibly grateful for, more so every day. But some of the circumstances that I can talk about, to give you an idea of, looking into past events and reevaluating them. Let's start with the death of my father. My dad died when I was 13, almost 14 years old, and I'm grateful for the experiences both before and after. Now, this isn't to be confused with the fact of thinking that I'm grateful that my dad is dead. I'm most certainly not. I've been robbed of a tremendous amount of experiences and love that my father could have given me, and I always continue to be envious, but envious in a good way, not in sort of a jealous way. But I've always continued to be envious of people who are able to have those experiences with their fathers, which is why I become in the past, especially with my one of my Month of Insanity videos, I think it's episode 14, where I encourage people, like, listen, if your dad is out there, like, please make an effort to reconnect and to rebuild that relationship. And if you're a father and you've got a son or daughter and you got a terrible relationship, like, please try and mend those fences, because it's really important. There are experiences that some of us really wish we had that we couldn't have. So I don't want to confuse anybody by thinking like, oh, isn't Flashwing saying that he's glad his dad's dead? No. It's not an experience that I would wish on anybody. But the reason why I'm grateful for the experience is because, especially what subsequently followed, well, number one, I still had a chance to have my father, for the first 13 years of my life. And even though a lot of those experiences were brief and I was really young, I at least had that to look into. But the experiences that happened afterward, my life changed dramatically after my dad died, as you can obviously imagine. My mom was the sole proprietor in our house. She was the one who went to work, and because my dad was disabled and couldn't do so outside of his business ventures. So we went from having a household where there were two parents, and my dad was usually available to help watch me and be an adult figure when I was at home, to now I lived in a single parent household, being 14 years old, and it was the middle of the summer, which means I was off from school. And, there was nobody that could watch me. There's nobody that, could supervise me. And so I had to ultimately become responsible for myself during the day when my mom was at work, because, somebody's got to make the bacon for the family and take care of the family. And I learned a tremendous amount of personal responsibility. And, I've more or less been taking care of myself in some capacity or another since I was 14 years old, so for the last, 21 years. And that gave me a lot of confidence and experience that other kids at my age didn't have. And in fact, it was hilarious because we kind of had a reputation within my neighborhood in Indiana of, my parents letting me run wild, which was far from the truth. I was a good kid, and we always had a good understanding about, if I fuck up, then I'm going to get reined in. But I just didn't fuck up, and so I had a lot more autonomy than a lot of friends of the same age. And I'm eternally grateful that I had those experiences, because without them, I may never have had the courage to move out to Arizona, or I may have had even more problems adjusting socially when I went to college. I had a real problem when I went to college for the first several months. I suffered from a lot of depression because I didn't know how to meet people. Like I was fortunate enough that I always, like, especially in school, people tended to gravitate towards me. Or I just end up in these weird circumstances where I would end up meeting people that would become good friends. And so I didn't know how to meet people, and college really forced that out of me, which is another experience I'm really grateful for, because it gave me a real aspect of social intelligence that I might not have had without that experience. So, just starting with something as tragic as the death of my father, that opened up a completely different world for me. And I've even given it some thought as to what my life might have been like had my dad stayed alive. And while he was a fantastic human being, his deteriorating health placed a lot of stress on the family unit as a whole. And there's always the possibility that I could have just become this out of control delinquent as a way of escaping home and potentially even repeating history of the kind of person that my dad was when he was my age at that point, at 16, 17 years old, where he's out partying with friends and drinking and wrecking cars because he just, he wanted to get away from his house. He had an abusive father who was a drunk. And, so that being said, there's always the possibility that things could have went south for me, potentially, if my dad would have stayed alive. I don't know. And it would have been no fault of his own, and it would have just been the additional stress and strain put on the family. And again, this is, I've ran this by my mother and she completely disagrees with me, which is fine. But the point being that this is just one possible future that I imagine could have happened had the circumstances been different. It's one set of circumstances that could have potentially been way, way worse. Let's see. Fast forward. One of the things that was kind of thrown in my face this week, which was really entertaining because it just kind of emphasized a gap in history that I had with a person I was talking to. But it was brought up about me not graduating from college. And I have to, and this is another experience that I'm really grateful for, but one that took a few years to kind of manifest itself. I was ingrained since I was really little that like going to college was something that I was going to do. That getting an education was not an option. Like this is what you're going to do. And I hated school, and I didn't feel like I learned very well in that environment. And college was a real struggle for me because I always felt like I was on the outside looking into the real world. And I had friends that were out living their lives. And so it was a means to an end at best. And it was a real boat anchor at worst. And, there were some other things that were going on at the time. I had like some health situations. Like, this is not an excuse. It's just the way it was. But I suffered from sleep apnea as I gained a lot of weight in college, and I spent a lot of time sleeping. In many cases, sleeping took precedence over going to class because, let's face facts, going to class sucks. So that's one challenge that I had. But ultimately, despite having gone to college for 4.5 years, I did not graduate. And this was a really embarrassing thing for me. For a little while, for a couple of years. And so I didn't tell my family, and it did help the fact that the Chesterton Tribune, the newspaper that was in the town that I grew up in, actually ran an article that said that I graduated. I had nothing to do with that. I was on the preliminary graduation rolls, or I think I applied for graduation. And but they never. But so they actually printed that I graduated, and here I am. I'm reading this article. I'm like, fuck. Am I gonna ask Cheese Chat to print a retraction because I didn't actually get my diploma, or my degree rather. But yeah. So so I just let it ride, and I just didn't tell anybody because I was so embarrassed, and I felt like it was a gigantic failure. But I'm very proud of the fact that I didn't graduate from college for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm proud of the fact that I didn't do it. And I know just some people out there who are listening to this, you're probably having crossed wires right now. Why would you be so proud of a failure like that? Because I had this expectation, as a lot of people did, that I had experience with going to school, that a degree basically meant that the world was your oyster, and that I would have probably fallen prey to that sort of entitlement mentality that becomes so synonymous with higher education these days. that, well, what do you mean you're not going to give me a job? I have a degree and you're going to pay me whatever I want. And oh, fuck you. Me having to do work? Are you kidding me? Go eat shit. So I would have had this, I know I would have had this entitlement mentality, because here it was for 4.5 years. I suffered. That's how it felt. I suffered through classes and got this stupid degree. God damn it, man. I want what's owed to me. And, so I'm very thankful that I didn't graduate, because I came out of college and it's like, great. Well, all I have is a high school diploma. And in my head, if you have a high school diploma, that's all you got, you're going to struggle. Everything's like 100 times harder and it takes 100 times longer. And so I just made the assumption that I was just going to have to work my ass off, and so I took shit jobs and I worked shit hours and I got paid, shit pay. And I didn't I mean, let's be honest, I complained, but I didn't let that stop me. And I most certainly wasn't, I wasn't taking that entitlement mentality going into my boss and, openly demanding that they just pay me more money just because of my presence. I had to earn my way. And, so that's definitely something I'm proud of. And I'm also, the other reason why I'm proud of graduating from college, is I don't exactly have great experiences with college-educated people. I find, in general, I find college-educated and higher-educated people to be incredibly close-minded, incredibly arrogant. There's no humility, there's no humbleness at all, there's no openness, and quite frankly, I find them to be some of the most ignorant people I've ever met, and most certainly some of the people with the worst work ethic. And I know that's very stereotypical, and I'm not saying that all college-educated people are that way. That's simply my experience. By and large, people who I meet, and if they are incredibly arrogant and very close-minded, and they have a real shit work ethic, I have absolutely zero surprise when they start telling me about all the degrees that they have from higher education. So that all being said, it's just one of those things where, so it was really funny because that kind of got thrown in my face, as though it was like some dangerous, dirty secret, had been revealed from my skeleton of closets. And so it really made me chuckle, because I'm thinking, man, not only do I not give a shit that I didn't graduate, but I'm actually proud of the fact that I didn't graduate, because in my limited, very narrow experience, people from higher education are dumber, they're more arrogant, and they do not have a work ethic. And I mean, like, people who can't even fucking show up to work on time, like that kind of thing. So that being said, that was something that really cracked me up. But that was an experience that happened to me. And, I don't mean to condemn everybody who went to college and has a higher education. Sooner or later, it's going to churn out people who are incredibly intelligent and real workhorses. But that hasn't always been my experience. So that being said, that's something else. And so, like, moving a little bit forward in time, when I came out to Phoenix in particular, I spent about 18 months, the first 18 months from 2006 to 2007 when I moved out here, hopping from job to job to job. And I was either quitting because I had a more lucrative opportunity somewhere else, or I was being laid off, or I was being fired. I've been fired from plenty of jobs. I got fired from a job when I was in college, which was absolutely my fault at the time. You talk about perspective. Like, at the time I got fired, it ruined a friendship for me. I held other people responsible. I felt cheated, but I fucked up. I fucked up, and I was doing shit I wasn't supposed to be doing. And I spent a lot of time being very angry about that. But I'm still thankful for that experience, because one way or another, it worked out. Things might have been different if I had stayed at that job. But no, so I went through a number of different jobs here in Phoenix. And there was one case in particular, which was the last place that I worked at before I came to work for the current company I'm employed at. And I was working for a startup company, a startup business in Scottsdale. And it was like, I was making shit money, and I was working 60 hours a week on salary. And, but I got quote unquote laid off, but it was I was basically fired with severance. And I was devastated, because this was the first job that I got, when I moved out here, and that actually had anything to do with my education and had anything to do with the stuff that I really wanted to do in my life. And it was a huge, huge bummer because it was an awesome job from the standpoint of the challenging aspect. There was stuff that sucked, but it's just what you got to deal with when you're starting out. And I felt devastated because I had this great opportunity and I was put into an impossible position. I wasn't even fired because of anything that like I did wrong. It was an epic miscommunication between the C-level leadership and like it might as well have been a physics problem. Like the task that they gave me was impossible to do within the scope of my experience and knowledge and the time that I was given. Maybe an engineer who had 10 years of experience could have pulled off what they asked me to do, but I couldn't. And they just were very blunt. They're like, if you can't do this in the next 24 hours, then you're going to be in the unemployment line. And they made good on that. But there's two things that came out of that experience that I am incredibly grateful for. Number one was one of these life lessons that you learn in really weird ways. I learned what it meant to be a professional when I got fired. Because here I was 25, 24, and I was angry. I was angry that I lost this job. I really felt betrayed. The way they fired me was really shitty. They pretended for several days that everything was cool. Nobody issued any disciplinary action. But people started coming to me and like asking me about what project I was working on and getting my fucking Rolodex of contacts. And I didn't know any better, but they were just basically scoping out what I was doing and slowly moving projects over to somebody else. And then they asked me, they got me and a coworker of mine out of the office that day to go do some tasks. And while we were gone, they changed the locks on all the doors. And we came back and we got ambushed, put it into separate rooms, and then we got fired. So I was pissed about how it went down, and I really felt betrayed by some of these people. And but part of my severance package was required, one, that I sign a non-disclosure, but number two, that I return all my shit, company phone, company laptop. And so I had to bring all that stuff back the next day. And I'm sitting in the parking lot talking to a coworker of mine who really felt bad because she was left out of the loop as well, and she was someone who I felt was a friend of mine. And so she's talking to me and trying to talk me through the process, and the CEO of the company pulls up in his Porsche 911 in the parking lot. And she was the woman I was talking to, I think she was from Brooklyn, and she was very, very professional and took her job very seriously, as she should. She took a lot of pride in her professionalism. And I remember she saw the CEO, she saw this flash of anger come across my face, and she looked at me and she like straightened my tie, and she's like, look at me. She's like, this is what you're going to do. She's like, you're going to go up to that man, you're going to shake his hand, you're going to thank him for the opportunity, and you're going to get in your car and you're going to leave with your head high. And I had a lot of respect for her. And so I buried my anger, and I did exactly that. I went up to the CEO and I said, I'm really sorry that it didn't work out. Thank you for the opportunity. I wish you all the best with your company. I shook the man's hand, and I got in my car and I left. And whenever I think of professionalism, I think of that moment, and that's what it looks like. And that's how I should strive to conduct myself, and that to take the personal, emotional nature of my feelings out of business. So that was one experience that I was incredibly grateful for. And anytime that there's ever a question of professionalism in my mind, I think back to that moment and evaluate as to whether or not what I'm doing matches that image. And if it doesn't, then I need to correct it. But the other side of it was, so I'm out of a job now, okay? And I have a strong desire to eat and, keep a roof over my head. And so I'm in full-blown panic mode because now I feel like I've kind of exhausted immediate options. I had pulled favors from friends in the past and worked in other areas and other companies, and so I was really running out of runway. So I spoke to a friend of mine whose father worked for a much larger company here in Phoenix, and I just said, listen, can your dad just shop my resume around and just ask anybody if they can give me a job? And he said, sure. So I contacted his dad, spoke to his dad over email, sent him my resume, And lo and behold, I was contacted by the recruiter for this company, and I was actually offered a position that was way better than what I thought I was. I thought I was just going to be eating shit, cleaning toilets, and like super entry level grunt work. And he presented me with an opportunity that was significantly better than anything that I thought I would get. And the whole hiring process took about a month and a half. So I was out of work for almost 2 months, and but I was hired. I was hired on the spot in my first interview, and then I started working. And 2 weeks after I started working, his dad quit the company. So I would have lost that window of having that into the company potentially. But that's not even the half of it, because even though you'd think that was kind of the skin of my teeth, skin of my pants, whatever. You had that 2 month gap of that narrow window to make it in to the goal. But I got hired into this company around May of that year. And the following November, in fact, it was the day before Thanksgiving, I got a text message from my old coworker from the startup company where we both got fired. And he told me that the company had gone out of business, that they had several $1 million of initial investment that they had burned through, and they had not turned a profit. And the company was shuttering. They were closing their doors, and they fired everybody the day before Thanksgiving, and they told them that they didn't have enough money to pay them. So not only did everybody lose their jobs right before the holidays, but then they didn't even have a paycheck to even get them through for another couple of weeks, until they found something else. And I've never been so thankful for being fired in my entire life. Like, at that moment, see, if I would have just simply not taken the time to reevaluate those circumstances, I would still be pissed about that. I'd still be mad that I got fired, because truly, it was there was nothing I could have done. I was fresh out of school. My technical expertise wasn't all that great. I was having to learn on the fly how to do stuff, and I was put into an impossible position to accomplish a task that just could not be done. And I could still be angry about it if I really wanted to be. But in this case, I had to now with this new information, with this new context, and the history of my past being 2020 hindsight, I was able to now look back on what were really stressful, terrible circumstances, to the point where I was actually starting to contemplate whether or not I was not even going to be able to stay in Phoenix because I couldn't afford it. I was going to have to pack everything up and move back home. Suddenly, I'm thankful that I lost my job, because I would have lost my job anyway. Except now, my buddy's dad wouldn't have worked for this company anymore. I wouldn't have had it in, and I would have been out of a job anyway. So, it's really important to allow yourself to reevaluate past circumstances and be able to see the connections between those circumstances and your current condition, present day, because for crying out loud, you can look back at something really awful and be like, I'm so glad that happened to me. And there's all sorts of other events like that have taken place throughout my life where I'm able to reevaluate, constantly evaluating things that have happened to me. And some of that, I think, comes out of the fact that I'm a person that believes that things that happen, that I think that things happen for a reason. I would be really, it's weird, because this is funny. I've been thinking about this even recently. I always felt like I would be incredibly disappointed to find out that everything that's happened in my life is just completely random. Like there's no structure to it. But I'm starting to feel a little differently about that. I'm actually starting to kind of warm up to the notion that in some ways, everything being random is a very beautiful thing, because it's like discovering harmony in nature, where nothing is really, there's nothing structured about nature. There's nothing structured about the universe on the outside, like on a very general sense, that there's no rules. I mean, unless you want to count things like physics and stuff like that. But I mean, you know, if you think about the universe acting in a very random fashion, the fact that we have so many things that line up, like the kind of stuff that you would really attribute to providence, to divine intervention, because of just how crazy it is. This is one of the reasons why, and this is like, I apologize for being for like sidebar to sidebar. One of the reasons why I love studying the American Revolution is because of how, like how seemingly impossible that situation should have been. I mean, the fact that a bunch of ragtag colonists, of which, only about a third of the people in the colonies at the time were even for breaking away from the British crown, but a bunch of ragtag colonists took on and beat the mightiest militaries, most certainly the most advanced and largest navy in the world at that time, and it's like, it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened. And any one specific circumstance or even person sometimes being omitted from the American Revolution, and the whole thing falls apart. So in some respects, as much as I want to feel like I'd be disappointed if I found out that things in my life were just simply randomized and that there was no real purpose or plan, in some cases, it almost makes the universe an even more beautiful place, realizing that in the midst of all that randomized chaos, that things still line up in an amazing fashion. And I really feel like all of this has roots in gratitude and being able to really objectively look at your circumstances and who you are and your personality and your memories and your capabilities and skills, and just be grateful to have all those things, and be grateful for who you are and your present state. And that doesn't mean that, it doesn't follow that there's going to be, that you shouldn't have discontent or you shouldn't be dissatisfied or anything like that. Because, I think that as people, I think that as humans, we're engineered to constantly be working towards something as a way of bringing about positive change, and that having no purpose and no significance is a really dangerous thing that people find the most awful things to do with themselves. As the saying goes, that idle hands are the devil's playground, that kind of thing. So, but it's not. You could be grateful and still be striving for more, but it's this. It removes some of that, some of the feelings of inadequacy, and it gives you a little bit more clarity in terms of the things that you're striving for, and helps you really evaluate whether or not what you're doing is because you're trying to fill a deficiency, or if it's in service of your growth. And that was something else that kind of came across my mind, is that you can have two people that are both highly achieved, that they've done great things, and you could have one person who performed the achievement because of in service to a deficiency. We talked about I think it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how a human being is not capable of pursuing growth until deficiencies are all met. And I really think that you could achieve great things but in service to deficiencies, but you could also have someone else who achieves great things in service of their own growth, and the two are not the same. They're very different circumstances. When you're doing things in service to deficiencies, you're achieving things and improving yourself, but you're doing it because you feel like you're inadequate. You do it because you don't feel like you're good enough, or you're trying to, bring happiness to your life, or you're trying to get more friends, more fame, more power. Like, all those things are deficiencies. And I feel like gratitude is one of those things that really, really helps fill deficiencies, because it helps you appreciate the things that you have. You may feel less of an inclination to fill a deficiency, like a social deficiency, such as love or friendship, by feeling grateful for the fact that you have people in your life who love you, and you have really good friends. and the need for safety and security, because that's another deficiency. It's a lot of physiological needs. Being grateful for having the body that you have and the health that you do have. Being grateful for the safety and security of your home and the safety and security of your employment and the safety and security that's provided by law enforcement and stuff like that. So I feel like you really could substantially satisfy a lot of the deficiencies that you have in life by simply exercising gratitude. And in doing so, it opens you up to the experience of growth. And because growth is deficiencies are the act of filling a hole, and growth is the act of building a structure on top of the hole that's been filled. And as I discussed when I discussed Maslow, you can't build a structure inside of a hole necessarily. There's got to be a stable foundation in order for that to work. So all of this, is a skill. It's something that you have to learn. And if you've never exercised gratitude before, it can be a real stretch. But I think that I've provided you enough tools that you can start with the most basic of things to be grateful for. But even exercising gratitude, even if you're really proficient at it, even if it's something that's really skilled, we have a tendency to, like I said, to take things for granted that are just so basic. Being grateful for having intact clothes that don't have holes, and having shoes that don't have bottoms worn through, or just being grateful to being able to go out and check your mail and not have to worry about being shot. All those things, like some of the most basic things that we take for granted. And there are so many instances in the news of, oh, good grief, aspects of people proclaiming oppression and persecution and discrimination, and all of these things are born out of deficiencies. They really are. And it's not to say that people out there are not experiencing real problems. But there are a number of instances where you're listening to the complaints of individuals. And when you start really comparing that, especially to other areas of the world, again, you need that context. You need that perspective to be able to use your imagination and realize that things could be a shitload worse under different circumstances. And the language that we use these days tends to be way more on the extreme side as a comparison to the problems that you're trying to describe. Just the nature of oppression. I'm oppressed. And it's like, well, why are you oppressed? Oh, I'm oppressed because, I'm a woman and somebody said that I get emotional. It's like, oh my God, are you fucking kidding me? But it's one of those things where, unless you practice gratitude and you understand that as a woman, you can't drive a car in Saudi Arabia because apparently it makes your brain shrink if you live over there and you believe that sort of thing. You want to talk about real oppression. I mean, folks, there's plenty of real world examples happening today across the planet where that sort of thing actually happens in a way that really negatively impacts the lives of the people that it touches. So, I mean, that's part of it too, is we're so busy focusing on what we don't have that when things don't line up exactly, that it's this tragic end of the world thing. It's my friend's 14-year-old, but as a freaking adult, oh my God, the Starbucks barista misspelled my name. And I have Brian with an I and he spelled it with a Y. Oh my God. It's that sort of thing. And there's real people out there that get pissed off about that sort of thing. And it's like, Jesus, man, the fact that you could go in and order a coffee and pay for it and not have to worry about being shot or something. I mean, or just the fact that you have that convenience that at any time you can go and get this amazing beverage, and that there are areas of the world with people in it that couldn't even have that level of convenience with all the money in the world, So all of that is just again, the emphasis that you can't have gratitude unless you have the imagination to be able to think about how your life could be and the negative circumstances that could exist if things were different. But it has so many positives that it's one of those things that if you're not doing it, you're really, really cheating yourself tremendously. You're cheating yourself out of all sorts of happiness, and you're cheating yourself out of really coming to peace with your past. Because I mean, that's something that's something that I know so many people struggle with. That things happen to them, and it's stuff that they just never quite can get over because of bitterness and anger, because of how painful the situation was, and how, it could very well be a case that it wasn't their fault at all, that they were truly victims of something that happened to them, and people can have a tendency to have difficulty moving past that stuff because they don't understand the connection that it has to their present day life, with the exception of the pain, the pain of the situation and the pain of the memory. That becomes the connection mechanism that they have to that memory. But when you substitute gratitude, which is a positive emotion, in place of that pain, by realizing that, think about it. I don't have a specific individual in mind, but I know this sort of thing happens. Think of the people who suffered, some type of domestic violence, okay? Some type of domestic violence or even child abuse, and how those individuals then became advocates against these things and became a voice for people who experience these things, and letting them know that it's okay, that doesn't make you any less of a human being if this has happened to you, and that it doesn't make you powerless. That it has the capability to really empower you, and that you can still survive and live a normal life with these experiences. Those people couldn't fulfill that positive role without that negative experience. And so while I'm sure that they would prefer that they not had that experience, we can't change the past. And so it becomes really critical to be able to have the gratitude for those experiences, even though they were really bad and awful, because it made them into the person they are today and enabled them to have the level of positive impact that they do on the lives of other people who are experiencing similar things. And that's how you make those connections. And that's why it's so important to constantly be reevaluating your past. And the small connection that I was trying to make before I got off on a sidebar about it was, I think that the reason why this process of reevaluating my past has come so naturally is because I really seek out the meaning in things that have happened to me throughout my life. And so inserting gratitude and being grateful for those experiences that were negative but now appear to be positive was something that came very naturally to me. It's not something that's going to be very natural to any of you who, like I said, are used to making those snap judgments about shit that happens to you and then never ever revisiting it. So I feel like that's probably the most exhaustive way I can cover gratitude and the benefits that it brings. And there's all sorts of different factors about it in terms of exercising it. There's all sorts of different, programs and methodologies where people say, you should exercise gratitude every day, and write things down that you're grateful for. However you exercise gratitude, I think, is a real personal decision, and ultimately based upon what kind of benefits that you really want to bring from it. But just even in the moment, when circumstances change or somehow you become aware of the fact that something that is happening to you or did happen to you, like just even from the perspective of your past, once you become aware of it, really stop and take the time to express that gratitude. It's immensely important, and you'll feel so much better, and it will really help you be at peace with whatever it is that you're grateful for, especially if it was a negative memory or a negative circumstance. But then, expand that into a daily occurrence where you don't even necessarily have to write it down, but just thinking about it, just being grateful for the fact that you woke up today, that you're able to listen to this podcast, that you're, have access to the internet, that you live in this day and age. I mean, my God, you could have been born 1,000 years ago, and where survival was significantly more difficult, and you didn't live nearly as long. And while, maybe it would have been cool to be born a couple hundred years in the future, hey folks, for all we know, we're all fucking dead in 200 years. I mean, really, so, for all we know, this is the pinnacle of human civilization, and we're like the last people that are able to enjoy it. We just don't know. We just don't know. And so being grateful for being born in this day and age is not a bad way to go. So that is it for gratitude. I do want to close this out by saying how incredibly grateful I am for all of you who listen to these podcasts all the way through to the very end. Most certainly those of you who have subscribed to my channel and continue to help provide the encouragement and feedback that you send me. It's all very, very appreciated. And although I don't necessarily always have a chance to respond and maybe interact in a way that you would all would like or would satisfy you, I do hope that you guys know that this is not simply a one-way communication stream, that I do see this stuff. I read the comments, I read the messages, and they are all very, very appreciated. It is a privilege. It is a privilege to have the talent to come on here and talk, and to have the gift of gab, and to manage to find a way to fill, an hour and 20 minutes of dialogue without really stopping. It's a privilege to be able to do this, and I am eternally grateful for it, and the experiences and the people that I've met as a result of that. So thank you for listening. I look forward to the next podcast or whatever other piece of media I manage to cough out over the next couple of weeks. Till then, guys, take care, and we will see you out there.